Well, good evening, everybody. I've got 6:30 on my computer, and welcome to Laramie County Extension and Laramie County Master Gardeners Gardening for Success program. And tonight's speaker is John Connett from the University of Wyoming, and he's going to give us a program on integrated pest management and kind of help us be better gardeners and reach for the least toxic solution first and try to do things better and more holistically. So John, I've got you set up to be co-host, and that way you can share screens and take control if you want. I've also let people know that this can be an open mic night, and if they have questions to just go ahead and ask them, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can go ahead and put your question in the chat box, and I will be monitoring the chat box. So you can go ahead and do that, and then I'll interrupt John instead. So with that, I am going to turn this over to John. And John, welcome to Laramie County Extension, Laramie County Master Gardener Program.
Thanks, Catherine. I'll see what I can do to get my screen shared here. Let's see. Does that show up as fundamentals of IPM?
John, I can see it.
Okay. All right. So so if that shows up okay on the screen, we've got a big green screen there. Okay. Okay with that.
Yeah, it looks good from my side here too, John. So I think
Okay.
you're good to go.
Okay. Sounds good, and I'm loud enough on here. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is, you know, I know most of you are familiar with IPM to some degree, but what I'd like to do is go a little deeper and really explain what it is and why and how IPM is the most effective system of managing weeds, diseases, and insects, any sort of pests. No matter what sort of pest there is on the planet, IPM is the best way to take care of it. So we'll kind of go into why and how that is. So before I get started, just mentioning, I'll maybe throw out a vendor name or something, but I'm not trying to favor anybody. I just sometimes it helps a little bit to know where to get something. So there's a lot of reasons why folks are gardening or planting or managing around a small acreage, and we all have different goals. Some people are just enjoying the work for relaxation, but with the different goals comes maybe a little bit of different strategies. But no matter what the pest is, IPM is really the way to go. Before I get started, I'll just remind us that pest is anything from a disease, insect, weed, just something that's in our way. It could be deer, whatever. But these systems work the same. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of IPM, we'll just talk a little bit about maybe some of these things that are not pests, things that could be confused with pests, like here we've got the very severe pest on the right there, that brown marmorated stink bug. They just damage fruit and young plants. But on the right, on the left side here, we've got this. This is an absolute beneficial that is just a predator of other insects. ladybugs, obviously good. Larvae are a little bit weird looking, but they consume a lot of aphids. Another one is this mealy bug destroyer. The immature stage looks like it's a pest, you know, so we might mistake it for a pest, but they consume again a lot of aphids and small insects. Flies, we've got flies that are super beneficial, like these tachinids. Their larvae stage just you know, parasitize a lot of pest species. Again, another one is these syrphid flies. They look like a little bee, but they're not. And their larvae, you know, like this green larvae is the larvae of the syrphid fly. I could easily mistake that for a pest, but it's actually a predator of aphids. So it's another good one. And we could go into many of these, but I'll just give you a couple more of these. This is a thrip that's a predatory thrip that's actually a good thrip. We think of thrips as bad, but this particular thrip is a predator of spider bites. And of course, a lot of little Hymenoptera, or a lot of little wasps are parasitoids or parasites on our pests. They, you know, put eggs inside there, and then they feed on the inside of that aphid, and they hatch out and do it again. And some of them are so tiny, like there's 28 of them came out of this one egg of a moth. And so we've got a lot of those little insects that are on our side. They're actually kind of working for us. And just a couple more. These minute pirate bugs, that, you know, of course, feeding on thrips and aphids, white flies, and lacewings. There's the green lacewing like this one, but there's a large brown one that we hardly ever see. Its larvae looks just like the green lacewing larvae, and of course they're going around just consuming massive amounts of aphids and small insect pests. And if you ever happen to see these little white eggs on hair stalks like that, that's good. That's great. That's the eggs of these lacewings. So just a little plug in here for Scott Shell's Insect ID on campus. Link to that is just Insect ID at UWYO. And one thing I'll just mention before I go much farther is that some of the things I talk about, irrigation and plant varieties and things, Catherine can you know, show you where those are, or you can go online at Wyoming Extension publications, and there's you'll be able to just type in your subject, and those bulletins will come up. So getting into just a little bit of what IPM is and how it came about. Back in the 50s, you know, we had these great products that came out of the Third Reich and Nazi Germany, all the chemicals that we could, you know, kill all of our pests with, and they worked great. One of the things that people didn't quite understand is that there's a little bit more to it than just applying them. So in our orchards, where these were used a lot in, of course, they're used in rangeland for grasshoppers and wheat fields, but in orchards, they really found out right away that they had insect resistance, insecticide resistance, where the even twice the rate wasn't killing the insects, and then they didn't know it, but their natural enemies were all destroyed. So it made the generations of pests more frequent and worse. And then their profits went away because, you know, the chemical cost something, and with the unhealthy crops, they just were completely decimated profit-wise. So the agronomists and the growers got together, and they basically, the short story is that they came up with the system of IPM, and then down the road we found out that it works for every pest in every situation. So basically, someone could look at it as just the opposite of neglect, which is way more than that, and we'll get into that. But if you notice, you know, this tree is the root is about a foot thick, lifting up the sidewalk. There's, you know, rabbits are in there and stuff like that. But another thing that this points out, besides it's just the opposite of IPM, is that, you know, when this tree was a seedling, just 2 feet from the sidewalk, you could have pulled it out with your bare hands probably. And likewise, we don't want seedlings of trees growing up this close to our houses or structures, because you know, they get big. So it's really wise to, you know, go around, make sure that things like that aren't growing next to our foundations, etc. So a lot of times when folks are thinking about IPM, basically this is sort of what they think of. They think of, well, it includes all the tools, and it does, but there's basically some things that are really important about IPM that is more than just using all the tools in your toolbox. But correct use of biocontrol or chemical control, etc., that is indeed very important part of IPM. And this is just, you know, relating that it's a system, and you know, you get to choose from all the options. It focuses on the best pest suppression, minimal impact on humans and the environment, non-targets. It includes IPM and ID and prevention and monitoring, and we'll get more into those in just a minute. But I really want to make a point that you can fit these to your situation. So it's not like a certain tool would be used in every situation. It could be that you'd never use one of the tools because it doesn't fit your goals. When I first started teaching IPM here at the university, I come up with this circle of the steps, and it's really not perfect because you know, some people have different steps, or they'll start with pest ID. But I would say that you know, you could start with monitoring, or you could start with prevention, or if you have a pest, you could start with pest ID. But you know, you might not have a pest right off the bat. So starting with any of these ID, prevention, or monitoring is definitely appropriate, and in fact, you know, could save you a lot just by preventing a huge problem. Just to mention that there's a little bit more to it. We won't go into all these details of all these other little components, but you know, mapping can help. Record keeping can certainly help keep you going in the right direction. Educating, if you have employees or folks that are on your grounds, you know, sometimes there's tips that you can, you know, train them in that'll help, you know, have less problems on your property. And all of these points are discussed in more detail on my website, and so at the end I'll kind of list again how to get to the website, but it's basically Googling up Wyoming IPM will get you into that website. So some of this includes some of the parts of IPM, but besides the types of control, it includes a sanitation, exclusion, and harborage, which is just, you know, cleaning up the junk. And we'll get into those just a little bit more and say why they'll be helpful. Let's see, wrong direction. But before we get into some of these harborage and sanitation and stuff, one of the important concepts that you often hear about in IPM is the threshold. Basically, that's just the point at which you start doing control, or you need to do control. And you can get with myself or Catherine if you want to know more about this threshold. But basically, it's a number of pests that you're dealing with. Like, you know, for instance, here, you got 1 dandelion versus 15. you know, if that's over your whole 10 acres is that thick, then you've actually, you know, you really have a problem. But a lot of pesticides, for example, will say, you know, when the pest reaches this certain threshold, you need to apply the product, or it could be that there's just an amount of insects or weeds or disease that is that you think is not suitable. Then that's the threshold where enough is enough. And so you know, in a case like this of just, you know, these dandelions, for example, you know, if this is all you had was 1 or 15, you can just, you know, dig them out real quick. It'd be no big deal, but it's usually not that simple. Sorry. So, you know, I just want to mention, you know, like on these little digging tools they're specifically for dandelions and work for a lot of other weeds. This longer version is really nice in raised beds. If you're trying to select in between some beneficial plants and the weeds, I've found it, besides a hoe, sometimes a hoe is a little bit too big and awkward to get in between things. That works pretty slick. On the, you know, chemical control, there's many times when chemical control is really a great option, but the real key to making the most of those products is definitely reading the label. There's all kinds of things, not only about safety, but about what stage of the pest is the most vulnerable and what time of day to apply the product. There's just a lot of things on the label. So the label is really kind of like the Bible for that particular product. And so it can be a little daunting because sometimes the thing is pages long, but you can pretty quickly zoom into that section that you're after, and it's quite helpful. Again, you know, we want to protect these non-targets, so that's another reason for careful application. Now, IPM, I've kind of been dealing with IPM for almost 40 years, and I kind of look at it like this, like the fire triangle is kind of like the disease triangle, and I take it further to a pest triangle. You know, if one of these is missing, you don't have a fire. And if conditions aren't quite right, like if you're up there enjoying a really nice campfire and just there's downpour, or you can't find good wood, you know, it changes things. So with a disease cycle, if one of these things is missing and it doesn't work, the disease doesn't work so well. So you know, obviously, if you don't have that pathogen there at all, you're not going to have a disease. A lot of diseases require a favorable environment like humidity. So you know, if the grapes are planted too thick and you can't get wind through there, then you know, it's going to make things worse. But a lot can be done with this susceptible host angle, and the reason I put a tree picture up here is because in Wyoming, on a lot of our calls all throughout the state, you know, I hate to say it, but almost 75% or more of those calls could have been prevented by watering more. We underwater our trees in Wyoming. Wyoming's a hot, dry place sometimes, and that'll get us. That'll be the start of a problem, typically. Now, on this idea of susceptible host, we can plant varieties that are much more resistant sometimes. And in fact, Karen Painter with the university has a whole bunch of publications on the type of plants and trees and shrubs that are really well suited to our climate that don't need a lot of babying. So so we can start with good varieties, but also really take care of those varieties. So the way I take this a little bit further is that it's not just plants that you know, that the triangle works for. If you think about it, for any pest whatsoever, you know, like if we have this turf that's really, really competitive and very healthy, it's going to keep weeds out better. Bees, we know that if we keep our hives, we have good hydration and pollen source and correct temperatures for our bees, they're going to be a lot able to resist whatever problem they come up against. Same with a house or a building. If it's not sealed correctly, you get mice and other pests. So the susceptible location, you know, how favorable it is for that certain pest. If you don't have any, you know, trees right up against your building, or if you have a, you know, it's just a lot of things you can do to eliminate problems. So another one is timing. You know, we found that like this star thistle, it takes pretty potent chemical to kill it when it's big, but when they're little, just a tiny whiff of 2,4-D, it clears it out, you know. And same with the like grasshoppers. Every time we get close to an outbreak in Wyoming, folks will just wait till they get big, and then you almost can't kill them. But when they're little, when they're stage 1, 2, or 3, just a whiff of insect growth regulator will wipe them out. So you know, monitoring, paying attention, getting out there and looking for them. You know, they're kind of cute when they're about a 1/4 of an inch long, and that's when they're super susceptible. You know, sometimes it's not super important to you know, get them when they're just first coming out, but you definitely want to get them before they set seed. You know, some folks kind of, you know, don't mind seeing the flowers because that kind of shows them where that problem is, but you definitely want to you know, get all the roots and not let them go to seed. There's a whole variety of ways to attack the problem, but you know, timing is super important. Not letting it get too much out of hand. Let me just go back and mention something really quick that I didn't have time to include in this, but you've probably heard about these do your own herbicides. Make them yourself out of vinegar or other things. And so lately I did try that, and I didn't put the pictures in here. It would be kind of interesting to put them in, but basically 16 ounces of vinegar, a spoon of salt, and a spoon of dish soap, and it completely fries these plants. So I thought I didn't know if it would work, but it actually does work. We'll talk a little bit more about these top 3, the Sanitation, Exclusion, and Harborage, a little bit. Exclusion is keeping things out. And there's just a whole host of things that would fit that that category, like you know, we tight dumpster lids, inspecting incoming shipments. You know, just to give you an example of this incoming shipments, you know, cockroaches don't do real good in Wyoming, but there's a cockroach from Japan that loves cold weather, and it's in New Jersey now. So shipments from New Jersey of cardboard and stuff, we don't want to mess around and just leave that cardboard around. If those particular cockroach eggs get in Wyoming, it's going to make control a whole lot worse, you know, because they're more suited for our environment. So, you know, just same with plants coming in, just making sure there's no pests on them before we put them in our landscape, things like that. So just exclusion is a big one. And in this case, it's just some cheap plastic fencing, but it's keeping the deer out pretty well. Also notice the mulch around here is keeping the weeds down. For rabbits, this little setup with, it's just a makeshift screen with clips and screen, but it's keeping the rabbits out. So you know, there's a variety of things that a person can do. And you know, definitely not leaving doors open at night. It's not gonna, is, you know, bad for mice and things. In Wyoming, we do have quite an amount of hantavirus in mice, but it's only in these deer mice, the ones that have a white bottom, white belly, two-striped tail, and it's not in. It hasn't been found in any house mouse, just a gray mouse. So one of the things about this is if you're cleaning up droppings on an acreage or in a shed, basically you don't need to know whose dropping it is. All you need to do is just kind of spritz that down with a spray bottle so that nothing goes airborne, because it's the airborne material that gets in your lungs and causes a problem. So just always kind of make sure to wet that down, or if it's a big mess, power wash it is great. But just don't be brushing the dry material around and breathing it. Okay, sanitation. Again, a lot of these are kind of overlapping with some of the cultural practices. Are just they kind of overlap a little bit, but cleanliness is always good. And you can see why that would be, just less clutter. But you know, obviously standing water for mosquitoes, but any pests in the building or out of the building, water is something that a lot of them need. So less water is better. No gutters that don't drain, things like that. And so again, it's just kind of redundant, saying the same thing. Brush piles aren't good for some pests, and depending on the goals of your area, this could be more or less important. Again, not moving seeds. These seeds of puncher vine are notorious for being spread around on shoes and dogs' feet and things like that, tires. So you know, it's good just to try not spread them any more than we have to. Basically, you know, these things look really disgusting on a picture like this, but a lot of times they happen kind of without us really paying attention. We kind of let things go a little bit in certain corners. But again, just, you know, pointing to the water, any excess water can cause you a lot of problems with, obviously with cockroaches and things. A lot of times when people are doing control for cockroaches, they'll go through all kinds of expense and hassle without eliminating that water, and they'll never get around it without eliminating the water problem. So no excess water first, and then attack the problem. These little drain flies are less than the size of the mouse on the screen, and they're just like less than 1/4 of an inch, but around a crummy drain, you'll start to see these things, and there's no reason to use any kind of a pesticide, because the second that you get the crud out of the drain, they can't live there, so they won't be there. Again, this harborage, not allowing a place for the weeds or the pests, kind of the same thing, just removing hiding places. This one about boxes off the floor and away from the walls. You know, when you're dealing with mice and feed and seeds and things like that, the bulk of your mouse problem will be within the first foot of the wall. So if you can get those pallets or boxes off the floor and a foot away from the floor, it won't eliminate the problem completely, but it'll eliminate the bulk of the problem. One time we had videos in a warehouse, and the mice, it proved that the mice were within that 1 foot of the walls, but every so often, about once a month, a mouse would just cruise straight across the shop, you know. It wouldn't make any sense. So they won't do the same thing 100% of the time, but they're pretty predictable that way. And again, if you've got a mess like this, you can't even get to you can't even monitor for mouse feces back there, let alone solve the problem. So a lot of times, cultural practices and mechanical practices, I kind of get those, you know, there's certain things that are considered both, like tillage is in both categories, but these are things that we do that just makes it the pest or the pathogen not work or not live well in that situation. Like for instance, aeration, aerating the lawn in southeastern Wyoming makes it so a lot of the weed species don't even want to live there. You know, if you aerate the lawn, you're catering to the grass and making it more competitive and needing a lot less inputs into taking care of your lawn. And mechanical, obviously, you know, everything from tilling to hand weeding, etc. Like this tilling, for example, you know, I'm old enough to remember when no-till became popular in the 80s, and it was a really an awesome shift from what we were doing. But you know, fast forward to now when we've got Hessian fly problems from no-tilling, a little bit of tilling helps. And so never get rid of all your tools completely. You know, there's a time and place for the different tools against pests. Again, tillage can be very helpful. And you know, we talk about monocultures being bad. Monocultures, a complete field of the same thing, or a complete forest of the same type of tree is really bad often, because you know it shows the pest. It's easier for the pest to find these plants because they're ubiquitous. The whole field is the same thing. But never say never, and always isn't appropriate either, because when is a monoculture helpful? If you've got a big weedy mess out back where they've had wildflowers and stuff, if you want to clean that up, a monoculture of one type of flower is a good idea, because you can tell the weeds from the flower, the desirable plant. So even a monoculture can come in handy to meet your goals sometimes. Again, I guess this is the same slide in there about clutter, but it's basically things you can do other than remediation. So getting down to the end here on slides that I've got, just throwing this in because we commonly have this yellow problem in Wyoming, chlorotic aspens, for example. And one of the reasons why we have that here is we've got alkaline soils, and so it's kind of hard for these aspens that are planted in places where they're not natural. It's hard for them to get the iron that they need, and so they really have to be having a drench of iron with sulfur. The sulfur helps them take up the iron, and again, you know, there's pubs on this sort of thing, but it's just a common problem that we see in southeastern Wyoming. So lastly, there are a few resources that I wouldn't be without. These top two especially, Weeds of the West book and Garden Insects of North America. It's got more knowledge than I have in there. It's just amazing breadth of knowledge and pictures of every stage of insect that we would ever encounter, just about. And then, of course, if you know, a lot of my work in my lifetime has been on biological control, and I wouldn't be without this book that was edited by Eric Coombs and others. It's just called Biological Control of Invasive Species of Invasive Plants in the United States. So this book on biocontrol is, there's not going to be books like this coming out because several of the authors are retired. But it's absolutely indispensable if someone's interested in biological control of weeds. So with that, that's basically all I have. But I'd mentioned that I've got this email that you can always send a question to, and then that website, just Google up Wyoming IPM. And with that, I entertain some questions.
Okay, John, Ellen had a question about insect growth, and I don't think she heard the whole thing, so it was way back more in the beginning of it. And Ellen, if you want, you can go ahead and just jump in and ask the question about, because all I've got here is insect growth, and I don't know if you were talking about growth regulators or how they grow.
So I'm not real sure what the question is.
I think it had something to do with a little bit at the beginning of your, it says you were talking about grasshoppers.
Okay.
Right, and you said you can control them with a shot of insect growth something.
Okay. So what I was mentioning there was an insect growth regulator is a product that is applied like an insecticide, but it doesn't just kill stuff. It basically is specific so that that particular insect can't molt to the next size. It kind of traps them in that molt and doesn't let them develop.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And John, a lot of people have gardens and have raspberries in their gardens. And of course, we're dealing with the spotted winged Drosophila. And do you have any words of wisdom on dealing with that?
Well, I think if I had that problem, I'd be Googling it up like crazy. and that goes for any problem. You know, there's a lot of misinformation on the web, but if you know enough about these things, as many of you do, you're master gardeners, so you can tell fact from fiction. There's always new info coming out, and so that's helpful. And again, you know, I would mention that IPM website that I have. Basically, I'm linking to the Oregon site, the Oregon pest site, where they go into great depth on things like spotted winged Drosophila. So I'm just saying, I'm not trying to cop out, but first I want to just mention that's what I would do. Now, getting more specifically about the spotted winged Drosophila, they're found that they're really spreading and getting worse, as many of your growers may know. But the very main thing that I would do with raspberries, for example, is, and it's a pain, because you just have to be cleaning nonstop. You have to, any debris, the picking has to be constant and quick and fast, because they're going to be on anything that's ripe or overripe, and they're going to be laying eggs in things from the ripe stage on. So if you have anything on the ground, it's going to be a problem. And so at the very minimum, you just have to be on it constantly to have it be super clean and super quick pick, and tell folks to eat the stuff fast before they find the eggs in there. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's really really the best info I have.
Yeah, and John, if I can jump in a little bit, we've been dealing with that since 2012. And biological, I just talked to a lady with Great Lakes IPM, and right now there isn't any biological control out there. There have been some work being done, but nothing's been released. So trapping is another tool. Cleanliness, like you say. There are some chemicals that are pretty effective with it. Malathion, Delegate, one day pick or one day post harvest. There's some organic stuff out there and Trust, but it can eat your lunch. I can guarantee you.
So while you're thinking of something else to ask, I just mentioned that, you know, I threw in there that idea that I had never really tried that vinegar on plants until this summer. And so I've been kind of having fun with it. I'll make up a bottle of 16 ounces of vinegar with a spoon of dish soap and a spoon of salt and take it out, and I get before pictures and after pictures. And typically on kochia, grasses, Canada thistle, the next day they just look like they're smoked. They're just completely smoked down. Now that's pretty fun and everything, but the one and this, I've heard about this online, and I did experience this, that you know, it's just a contact, so it's only taking the top off. It's not dealing with the root system. And if there's a lot of root systems in there, then you're going to be fighting that same thing forever. It's just going to keep coming up. You have to keep hitting it. But it is sort of a neat and satisfying way if you just have a few weeds here and there. It does seem to get them up to the stage where they're flowering. So it's something I had never experienced actually before, but it's kind of interesting.
Couple more questions have just popped in. One of them is, please repeat your vinegar recipe for weeds, which was pretty much salt or vinegar and some salt.
Yeah, so that would be just what I've been mixing up is 16 ounces in a spray bottle of 16 ounces of vinegar with a spoon of salt and a spoon of dish soap, and it's been working pretty amazing.
Very good. We like that. Couple other questions here. Could you describe an IPM approach? Here's your challenge for the year, to cheatgrass, and in the same vein, Dalmatian toadflax.
Sure. Easy one. So actually, I did my master's degree in a cheatgrass system. That was biological control of yellow star thistle, and where I worked with insects on the yellow star thistle in that cheatgrass system. And I say cheatgrass system because once it dominates a landscape, the landscape is kind of like a Superfund site. It's there's no quick fix at all. It's there's no silver bullet. There's no quick fix. There's and there's basically no IPM. It's just going to take care of that. What that is when you've got a cheatgrass dominated site, you've got a damaged site. You have a site that's vulnerable to invasion by other things besides other invaders other than cheatgrass and Dalmatian toadflax and things like that. So really, one of my biggest things with an acreage that has cheatgrass is that the most important component isn't getting rid of the cheatgrass. The most important component is what you put in there once you've got rid of the cheatgrass. You can remove the cheatgrass, but you've got to have something in there to compete with it. And if you do, then you're not going to have cheatgrass. And it's almost like the puncture vine around Torrington. That puncture vine is terrible But, you know, the children's home over there had several softball fields and they just couldn't use them because of the puncher vine. Well, when they put sod in there, they never had an ounce of puncher vine ever again because it can't deal with the sod. Well, it's kind of the same principle with the cheatgrass. And to some degree, Dalmatian toadflax is that if you're managing for the desirables, then you keep your cheatgrass out of there. And that's like grazers and ranchers saying, well, you know, I get a little bit of benefit out of that spring graze. No, 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 no. Do not manage around cheatgrass. But you really, there's a lot that could be said, and there's definitely some new chemistry out there that is good on cheatgrass, but basically it doesn't matter what you do to take it out. You have to get you have to have desirable species, and desirable competition is the key when those things are a problem.
What are those desirables? I mean, you can yank it out by its little roots, and then what's a good thing to put back in its place?
You name it. Anything that, you know, there's not, you know, if you can get, that depends on what you want there. And in some locations, it's going to be harder than others to put something in its place. But if you have any ability to put, you know, like one would be the crested wheatgrass. You know, and I don't really want to put out species because it ranges from A to Z. You could put rhubarb in there, you know, but you just have to have something there in its place, depending on what you want there. Basically, anything else would be fine. When you're like, for example, I had a huge hillside that was just dominated with cheatgrass, and then yellow star thistle moved in and took out the cheatgrass and dominated that site. And so I had some bunch grasses, some blue bunch wheatgrass and some bunch grasses in part of the site. And when we got rid of the yellow star thistle, it did help that bunch grass. But most of the site didn't have bunch grass anymore. It'd been overgrazed, and all that bunch grass had been ruined with horses' hooves and everything. So the bulk of the site didn't have bunch grass. So it got worse weeds than cheatgrass and Dalmatian toadflax. It got Medusa head rye solid, and when we moved that out, it got common crepina solid. So you just wind up with a succession of undesirables. So if you've got the ability to put garden plants and things like that, then you're not going to have a problem. Now, in that environment, in that canyon land of Hell's Acre, Hell's Canyon, and Orofino, Idaho, and Lewiston, Idaho, they did find a way to reseed, but it's really expensive. So you got a 45-degree slope and just solid overgrazed, just cheatgrass environment. So what they found that works, which is not the easiest thing to do, but they took and they had a sheep herder that could really well manage the sheep, and they had helicopters flying on seed right before a rain, and they took them sheep and they incorporated all of the seed into the ground with the sheep's hooves by running the sheep all over where they reseeded with the helicopters, and then proceeded that then they had a rain right after that. And so that's what it took on a steep hillside to get desirable species in there. But basically, you know, I'll fall back on, you know, putting desirable in place of cheatgrass is absolutely part of the plan.
So any other questions, thoughts, comments?
Yeah, Catherine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Vance. Hi again. My question is, why is such a beautiful and beneficial plant, the dandelion, considered a weed?
Yeah, it's a good question about the dandelion. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on here about it, but I'll just mention a little bit. When I was a little kid, I grew up in Wyoming, and I didn't like school, and I had trouble with school, but I remember the first question that I answered correctly out on a field trip, and it it just happened to be that later on it had to do with agronomy, but some conservationist out there on the little Poposia River said, well, what makes a weed? And I just piped up, well, it's just a plant out of place. And sure enough, so apple trees could be a weed, I mean, to somebody, and dandelions are some people consider them a plant out of place. What's interesting is that one of my jobs, one of my largest jobs, was where I took care of 120,000 varieties for the federal government, and so I was these varieties have useful genetics, and so I did that for 10 years. That was all the cereal grains and all their wild relatives, figuring out how to unlocking secrets to how to grow them. And then I went to industry for a while, and I came back, and they gave me all the medicinal plants in the world to grow. They said, figure out how to grow these things and how to get seed or clones from them. And so I had 7,000 different varieties to grow. And one of those varieties was dandelions. We had dandelions that produce rubber. And so dandelions, there's not just any dandelions. It's not, but they look just like the ones in your yard. They're from Tajikistan, and an interesting thing about those dandelions is that in order for us to get Russia to go into World War II with us, we had to stop our dandelion research. We were researching dandelions because they could do all the rubber production we need. And so all of our universities, at least most of them, burnt their dandelion seeds that they're doing research on. There's a couple of universities that didn't, but those seeds got too old and died in storage. So even a dandelion, it's not really a weed when you're using it for rubber production. And right now, there's huge corporations in America trying to figure out how to grow that stuff again. So again, it's just depends on your goals. If you want tons of bees and you don't want little kids in your yard, then maybe tons of dandelions are great. It just, it's kind of like IPM in general. There's a lot of pests, a lot of beneficials, and it just depends what your goals are of how you're gonna, which tools you're gonna use and which things are gonna matter to you. The dandelion just happens to adapt to all the yards, and other than that, I don't really have a great answer for you.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, the problem I run into with dandelions when I do yard calls is homeowners have this perception that their grass needs to be perfect. And that does not include dandelions or quackgrass or fescue, fat-bladed fescue. So it's a perception, it's a homeowner perception that their lawn has got to be perfect. And it makes me crazy because I'm not a lawn person and I don't get it, but it's really kind of a status thing with a lot of these homeowners that they have to have the perfect lawn. So until we can get around that perception, Vance and Hannah, it's really going to be hard to stop people from poisoning their dandelions.
Well, and I don't know if this helps at all, but to give you an example, if you're familiar with black medic in yards, black medic, it's kind of a legume, kind of like a clover looking plant, but it has a yellow or round yellow flower. Instead of a clover head, it's an even smaller little flower that's yellow. And some people don't mind it, but boy, it'll take over a yard. And I have a friend who's an amazing gardener, off the charts. Never met a better gardener than this fellow. And he decided to make a goal of getting rid of the black medic in a huge landscape that he had. And his landscapes are always ultra beautiful. And I visited with him last summer. And after 25 years, he showed me, he goes, and you can't see any weeds in the yard, but he took me out there and goes, you see this? After 25 years, I'm still pulling black medic. and so if you really care, you're in for a long fight. That's all I gotta say. Unless you use weed and feed consistently every spring, on top of having a super competitive turf, but there are, it just depends on your management and how you want to approach it.
Yep, and I am kind of a champion of dandelions, and I tell people not to worry about them and to stop poisoning them. And why? Because they're so important to our native bees and our honeybees. They're the first bit of food for them. So any other thoughts or questions here? We got a few more minutes. Any other garden problems, pest problems that you're seeing?
I'll just throw out there while we're here, and maybe this is kind of redundant because folks maybe are already aware of this, but if there's white satin moths or moths or caterpillars just all over trees, if that ever becomes a problem, they do have a BT product that you can spray on there, and you get those containers that fit on the end of a garden hose. It's a sprayer on the end of a garden hose, and you can they have ones that reach clear up in the top of a tree. And so that BT product, when they're in a caterpillar stage, is pretty handy. That's something that they've been dealing with down in Utah right now.
So John, I get an email from a friend, also a horticulturist in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And we've been advised that they have now found Japanese beetles in Scottsbluff. And I know there's been some down in Fort Collins, but I don't think it's a real big problem. And I know that we're scouting for Japanese beetles, and we've got some pheromone traps out around the airport just looking for them. And fortunately, they're not here. But do you have any IPM comments or suggestions?
Not a whole lot, but they are really bad in Denver right now. Or at least last summer they were super bad in Denver. But there is a disease that they're susceptible to, so that may help out in some areas like Boise where they're really thick. But the main thing is just if you can have a 5-gallon bucket with about 4 inches of soapy water in there, and you just go along and bump them all off in there, that's probably the main thing. And squishing them and bumping them off into bumpy water. Other than that, there will probably be more control options coming out down the road. But just being vigilant and like I say, that's one of the things that I know people have had luck with.
Yeah, the Japanese beetles are pretty devastating when they get going, and I've been back in Missouri and just gotten you know, they don't fly very well. They're not very good navigators. And so they just sort of run into what's ever in their way. So they're kind of annoying. But so we all need to be on the lookout for Japanese beetles because they've been found in Scottsbluff. Hopefully Wyoming is just too wild-winded and weather-wise that they just don't find it fun to live here. So again, any other thoughts or comments? Well, not seeing anything coming in on the chat box.
Catherine, this is Vance again. Where could I learn more about this, the dandelions? Yes, I'm fixated on dandelions, sorry, but that they produce rubber. I've never heard that before.
Okay, all you gotta do is Google up the genus for dandelions, Pterassicum, and just Google up Pterassicum and rubber, and you should have plenty of stuff come up.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can buy dandelion tea at natural grocers or Whole Foods, and it's very tasty.
I'd rather drink dandelion wine.
Yeah, I mean, it's all edible. It's all good. I don't know why people want to kill it. They should go out and harvest it, put it in their salads or something. So anyway, any other thoughts or comments, questions?
There's even this tea for detoxing the liver is dandelion detox.
Yeah, there you go. Very fun. All right, John, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time tonight. I sure appreciate it. And everybody else here, thanks for joining in and being with us tonight. So with that, I'm going to end the program and probably see you. We've got a couple more programs in the works, and so I'll get an email out to y'all. But in the meantime, you guys have a fun week. Stay safe, and we'll see you again on Zoom. John, again, thank you and have a great evening.
Yep. Call anytime.